Sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties, so started about 5 minutes late, but should be good.
Right. Hey, there's Chris.
I made it.
Right. Well, cool. Yeah, everybody. So we're just going to blame Oscar. He's not here today. He left and took the keys with him. So we finally got back in here, got things rolling. As you can see, we brought Chris Caston along with us. Chris, you want to introduce yourself, kind of say what you do here?
Sure. So I'm Chris Caston. I'm one of the incident response case managers here at FRSecure. So just primarily just help people who are in a bind, jump in and help them figure out what happened, root cause, kick the bad guys out. It's fun.
Yeah, awesome. Well, cool. So I know normally we have a nice little segue here, talk about sandwiches, pizza, something like that. But I think our difficulties, we may need to cut that short today, unless you guys have got a good one you want to throw out there.
I've been busy for the last 15 minutes, panic on how we're going to start this thing up. So I think my brain's just like kind of blank at the moment. But yeah,
Oof,
technology,
yeah.
right? Should get someone in this. We should get someone who knows something about that.
I know, man. Computers are hard. I don't know why. So, yeah, well, cool. Well, so other than losing faith in our abilities with technology, hope everybody's doing good today. Got a few cool things to talk about. Like I said, Oscar is out. He's been doing suit things, so we'll give him a little bit of a pass and let him enjoy some time there. But yeah, so first thing, guys, I think we want to talk about here, and probably a whole lot of folks have heard about this at this point because I know it's a pretty heavily used product, but Atlassian Confluence, big vulnerability here recently. So CVE number for anybody paying attention is CVE 2022-26134. Pretty big one. It's an RCE. I don't know. Did you guys get a chance to read up on this? Anybody want to run us through what it looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off, I guess, with just talking about like it was, I think, pretty much all versions of the Confluence server, data center server, on-prem, right? Like people with cloud-hosted Confluence, not affected as far as anything I've read. So this is just for those specific products. But yeah, and I believe the patch for it was released on June 3rd. So I mean, if you do have that in your environments and you haven't patched yet or anything like that, make sure to do that. But yeah, I definitely did. I mean, apparently what this is an OGNL injection. OGNL is the Object Graph Navigation Language, which is used to, it's like an expression language. It's used to kind of do different things with Java objects in the environment. And so it can do anything from setting some properties and stuff to working with some Lambda expressions and other things, I guess. And so essentially just kind of in the URI or URL of the server that's affected, you can put in some code and you can essentially have it execute that code and return back the data. It doesn't return it back directly in the page, but people found a kind of creative way to return it back in a header. And so you can still kind of get data back as necessary. And so it's a full RCE. And they started, definitely it was discovered because it was being exploited in the wild. So yeah.
Yeah, I saw I saw a couple conflicting reports on how many servers that were out there. Not necessarily vulnerable servers, though most of them probably are, like Eric said. One note on June 5th said there were about 4,000 servers online, most of them in the US. Another one I saw was about 8,300, a little over 8,300 hosts out there that are on and running this. So a lot of potential for exploit. As I was reading through it too, a lot of web shells, that kind of thing being dropped with this. Look like our good friend China Chopper, which was used extensively in the proxy logon, proxy shell attacks. That was most of what we saw out there. I know, Chris, you worked some of those, so chime in and talk about that here in just a second. Another one was called Behinder. Thought that was interesting. I hadn't read up on Behinder before, but it was a memory-only web shell. Kind of a neat concept. Also a little bit scary from us on the blue team side, looking for artifacts and that kind of thing. So, yeah, Chris, did you dig in on this one at all, or find anything cool with it?
Yeah, and I popped into Shodan and just threw Confluence in there, and I got almost 13,000 returns that look like logins for Confluence. So I'd imagine all of those, if they haven't been patched, would be potentially vulnerable to it. I did see from the blue team side, it looks like there's some valuable artifacts that might be found in wherever Confluence Apache access logs are kept. So there's an Atlassian-confluence.log. And it looked like some of the signatures that like Palo Alto and some of them had thrown out there were just basically looking for PowerShell.exe or who am I, just some commands that you wouldn't expect to see in there from that perspective. One other thing that I kind of struggled with was I started looking for like architectural diagrams for how this should be deployed, especially like the on-prem stuff, because I imagine that's who gets mostly hit by this. And man, I had a heck of a time trying to find any of them that suggested that you should ever connect this to the internet. So, I mean, am I missing something, or is this
Nope.
like the vCenter stuff where people keep getting smoked because they're hanging vCenter off in the DMZ?
Yeah, that was my impression of it, right? Is that realistically, you should never have this thing just exposed to the internet, right? I mean, like most things, there's so few things that we need to be exposing. And I'm sure, just based on kind of what folks use this product for, documentation and team collaboration, things like that, probably another victim of COVID over the last couple of years, right? So everybody went home, they stuck these things out on the internet so people could get access to them. But just one of my notes here was just come on, just put it behind the VPN. It's not that difficult. Just do that. But yeah, I had the same thought when I was reading through that. It's like this just shouldn't be out there. And if you saw 13,000 of those, that's way too many. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah,
So
I
many
mean,
out
one thing
there.
I'll say is that, and then I'll argue against my point right after that because that's how my brain works. But one thing I'll say is that we've been running into, especially like in that medium small business, right? We're running into a lot of people who are moving away, especially post COVID or post the start of COVID, of just kind of getting rid of the internal network, right? I've talked to multiple different clients or potential clients recently who are like I'll ask them, hey, do you have a central network, an office network, an internal network? And they're like, yes, but it's really only supporting like a couple things. Like we've got accounting type stuff, or we have some very few things that are going on in there. We've got like a handful of people, 5 people who VPN in. The rest of our employees don't touch it. They never log in. They don't have VPN creds, right? And so people are reluctant to set these things up like in a way, like they might still have some servers in that environment, but they're reluctant to have people like set up all this infrastructure for everyone to VPN in and worry about all that instead of just accessing it remotely. We're seeing a lot more of that. Now, my argument against that is like most of those people are just going with the cloud services and should have been probably using Confluence in the cloud anyway, right? But that might have something to do with some of these types of things where these people are kind of getting away from having those internal networks, but at the same time want to have them accessible, so they're just making them public. I don't know, or they configured them wrong in the first place.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I think as and all of us have been sysadmins and stuff in the past, and I think we can all, understand that mindset, right? And a lot of times, right, it's, hey, we bought this new product, get it up and running right now. We don't care about anything else, just make it happen. And you bring up security concerns and things like that, and you just get pushed back. It's just, hey, just do it, make it happen. And so, I do understand that, and it's tough though because every most of the major things we've seen over the last 2 years have been exactly that, right? It's something that's on the internet that shouldn't be on the internet, or has full outbound and shouldn't have full outbound, and that kind of thing. So I think it's going to make it more important, right? I mean, we're just going to have to keep on this path and keep hoping to get through to people to do that if they've got the resources. But or like you said, in this case, like move to the cloud product. I saw the chuckle there. Did you catch the chat there? So,
Internet was a mistake in the
yeah,
chat.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, sure, yeah.
Hard to
Oh,
argue. Hard to argue sometimes.
so yeah, so I mean, from a blue side, kind of thinking through ways to look for this and things you need to do as well, right? Like we said, the China chopper, it was a popular web shell used in the Exchange vulnerabilities over the last couple of years. That one's pretty big. Really, you can find that though. That's not a memory only, right? So they're going to drop that on disk if you've got a way to look for some odd ASPX files, something new on your machine that you don't expect to be there. That can be tough if you're not looking at it every day. There are some ways to handle that. Look for creation dates and things like that. It's a big one to look for. The behind your web shell, the memory only one, I don't know if either of you guys know of a good way to look for memory only artifacts like that, unless you've got a memory dump. But that one was essentially being dropped, and then they were using that to pull over like China Chopper. Looks like it can also tie into Cobalt Strike and Interpreter, so two popular attack tools, also popular pen test tools. So a little bit of trickiness there. But the thing with me here, as I'm looking through this, is I'm thinking about it, in the same way we did all the exchange tags, right? Is don't just look at the server. Find that, see if you were compromised. I think realistically at this point, if you've got an exposed server, probably a pretty decent chance it has been compromised at some level. So, work to confirm that, but don't just stop there. What else did you have access to from this server? Where else could they have pivoted to? What kind of credentials could they have gotten? Think through that process when you're doing your investigation. And if you don't know how to do that, reach out to somebody to help, right? Whether that's us or somebody else, but make sure you get somebody to take a look at that.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I recall, with the China Chopper stuff, like looking for hashes isn't going to do you a lot of good, because a lot of that has like the internal domain or the external domain tied in there too, so it changes the file.
Yeah, totally 100% there. That's all those hashes are going to be different most of the time, unless somebody just dropped one that's non-functional or something. But those hashes aren't going to be good. A lot of the tools that do more heuristic type scanning picked up on it though, so you may have a shot there with some of those, but definitely wouldn't rely on that. I would dig in, see what you can find. That's a really good point. Yeah. Let's just try to see if there's anything else on this one. You guys got anything else about this one, or want to jump on over?
I think that's pretty much it for that one.
Okay.
Eric, yeah, I will say that I guess when I looked at the way they patched it and stuff, they patched it with kind of a multi kind of phase thing. So that was at least good to see. Hopefully we don't see any kind of weird, Confluence 2 drop in a week or something like that. The way it looks like their approach to doing this was to remove it from multiple points, essentially kind of change the way it handles those requests, and then changes some of the things about it. So without getting deep into it, at least the approach seems to be good, having looked at the actual diffs from the patches. And I would hope that we don't see any other kind of form of this come back out soon.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we don't want to see a repeat of the last couple, right? Like Log4j, right? It was like patch and then it was still broken, or it caused another problem, things like that. So
yeah, I mean, don't quote me on it, but I was at least happy to see that it was like 3-tiered, and it wasn't just like we changed the one line that was affected, because that's always concerning when you see people do that. So yeah,
absolutely.
That actually dovetails nicely into our next topic, because that one seems like it's just keep changing that one little piece. And
yeah, and so I was going to see, Eric, I know you dug into this one a little bit. I don't mean to keep putting you on the spot, man, but that's what I'm going to do today. But the Follina, however you pronounce it, I'm not entirely sure, but was essentially a Microsoft vulnerability that got used in some attacks. For the CVE on that one, it's CVE 2022-30190. Again, been pretty big in the news here in the last little bit, but I don't know, Eric, did you get a good handle on how that attack plays out and how they're using that?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, I mean, it's taking advantage of a couple of different things. At least the initial part that came out, right? The initial Follina that they were seeing was, a kind of a combination of taking advantage of something in Word that would essentially go pull data when it probably shouldn't, or definitely shouldn't, right? So everybody was like, "Well, that's an issue in and of itself," and then using that to take advantage of the MSDT to further exploit and get execution of certain things, right? And so it's kind of a two-part thing. The first part, like Word handling, and downloading and getting data that it shouldn't, that could be fixed, but then the MSDT stuff is still going to be an issue. And we're starting to see that in the fact that other things are, have potential exploitation, right? So I know that one of the things we've seen is that if it's in an RTF, then you can just, when the preview tab renders it, right, it'll execute, right? There was someone that found that the wget in PowerShell's wget will automatically execute the code, not just download it, but literally execute it, which doesn't even make sense. That's not what wget's supposed to do. right? But it did because of its interaction with that. I saw something recently of someone exploiting it with Foxit PDF reader, getting it to trigger off of that, having the PDF call out to that MSDT, and then getting execution that way as well. They did note that in their research about it, that the Adobe Reader did not work because Adobe Reader does sandbox. And so it was failing in that environment. But I wouldn't be surprised if other situations in an unpatched environment, at least, will be able to take advantage of that too. So it's not going to just be Word. You can't just be like, oh, well, we don't let any Word docs come in, so it's going to be fine type of thing. I mean, there's going to be other ways to take advantage of this potentially, both from an outside, like a phishing perspective or something like that, to also the perspective of someone who's already in the environment who wants to execute something. I mean, in .lnk files, for that matter, I can take advantage of it as well and get that. So, having someone, if I'm in an environment, tomorrow, and then I don't think they're patched or whatever the situation might be, I might just use PowerShell's wget to just get code execution, right? That's a good way to get around some stuff potentially. So, a lot of different ways to potentially utilize this one.
Yeah, so a couple things that hit me there as you were talking too is, um, I'm impressed Adobe did something right. I feel like
I think Adobe's had so many problems in the past.
I think we should put that on the calendar.
Yeah,
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 sandbox it all, man.
Yeah, new security holiday is the day
Mm.
Adobe did something right. And I mean, look, I know we do pick on them a lot because they do a lot of terrible things, and they've had a lot of problems. But yeah, that was that was surprising to me as we were going through it too. And yeah, and the preview pane, right? So I know a lot of folks, there's a really good use of this tactic, because I know a lot of folks, if you get something a little bit questionable in an email or something, we'll use that preview pane and just kind of be like, oh, okay, yeah, this is legit. I was expecting this, or it's, not anything bad. I know I've done it recently. We got a survey from like a insurance company we were going to work with that I was not particularly expecting, and so we hit the preview pane, see if it looks legit. Sure enough, it did. But yeah, abusing that's pretty interesting. That's kind of a neat new tactic as well.
Mhm.
I did have a note this was patched in May. I'll be honest with you. When I first looked at this a couple weeks ago, I don't think they noted that it was patched. They had a bunch of workarounds and things like that, but it says it was patched in May. So I'm a
So
little iffy on that.
what I read too was interesting. Is like, I know that publicly it started gaining traction on I think forget who now off the top of my head, but like on May 27th, there was a tweet about it, and it was discovered in the wild. They saw it, they kind of bring it up. So May 27th is when a lot of it got drawn to attention. I did see some researchers and some, write-ups and stuff like that that were saying that all of the like Office 2013, 2016, 2019, 2021, Pro Plus, Office 365 were all affected. And as of the writing of those articles, which was like a week ago or something like that, right? Or whatever it was, maybe a couple weeks ago when this first started dropping. But they did say that when they had pulled a like insider program patch or something like that, or like that version, it was not working in that, but there was no actual note that they had changed it in that, but it wasn't. So it had been patched at least on that side, but I don't know about as far as the public ones that people were seeing. I honestly just can't speak to that. As far as what I'm seeing, it seems like it was only in that insider one back in May, maybe.
Makes sense. Yeah, I don't know what the lead time is on those insider ones to public either. I would assume a month or two, honestly. So maybe that's the case.
Yeah. I can also say too, I'm digging into it more, that they were seeing like going back into VirusTotal and seeing things that were uploaded back in April and even potentially before that in March or something. They were seeing use of this, analyzing files back before. So this all made news, and someone actually brought it and kind of analyzed and found it in May. But apparently it was being used and uploaded to VirusTotal for checks and stuff like that back in April, and maybe perhaps earlier.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I mean, we talk about that a lot, right? Is something gets announced in May, that doesn't mean that was the first time it was abused. Very likely been being abused for a while. Somebody else found it and just didn't make a big noise about it. So yeah, I know. Chris, I think you were digging into this a little bit too. Did you find anything interesting there?
Yeah, actually, so I took a little bit of a different angle on it and started going back through. I know when we'd originally talked, we were talking about how it was being leveraged by state-sponsored attackers. So I started digging into the Proofpoint Twitter posts on that. And let's see. So one of the things that I noted is every IP that they noted in their Twitter posts were that Vulture Holdings LLC. I'm sure you remember that. For whatever reason, we see that all the time with malware or being used as a C2. So that was kind of interesting. It looks like it's being used that it first downloads the payload from one IP address. It's usually encoded PowerShell, goes out to a domain that's hosted on that vulture.com. There was, in the article that you sent me, they missed a comma regarding it checking for virtualization. So in Proofpoint's version, it looks like it's looking for that to do some anti-forensics stuff, try and keep it from being analyzed. And then it'll steal information from the local browsers, mail clients, file servers, and then some general recon on the system that it gets, zips it up, and then exfiltrates it again back to a vulture.com owned IP address. And then at least from what Proofpoint had pointed out, was it looks like it's kind of focused on salary increases for government employees or employees. So trying to trick them into doing that. And it is using the RTF version, probably in the hopes that they look at it and explore, get it popped. Yeah, and they didn't provide any additional attribution on that, like who it is that's doing that. But it gets me thinking that we should probably look back at some of the cases we worked with that vulture stuff and see, who was active during that, or what languages they were speaking, when they were working, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the vulture stuff. So just to kind of make sense of that, it's a hosting company, right? So think AWS, Azure, GoDaddy, whatever, right? It's a hosting company. We tend to see them. Well, we've recently started to see them. Before that, it was all DigitalOcean, right? Every time we popped into an attack, it was almost always there was a DigitalOcean owned IP involved somewhere. And so we just started, like, if we see DigitalOcean, we immediately start getting concerned. There's plenty of legitimate uses for both DigitalOcean and Vulture, I'm sure. We just see them a lot. And I do agree with what Chris is saying there about we probably need to go back and look and see if maybe we can see where this was being exploited, months ago, because I would say it was, I don't know, 4 to 6 months ago, we started seeing that Vulture Data Center LLC pop up. And we've been seeing it in a lot of cases, right? So it could just be the new thing that, attackers have rolled to. Maybe DigitalOcean's flown up, thrown up too many flags and people are kind of blocking those IPs now. But yeah, that is an interesting find, and I didn't see that when I was scrolling through there. So kind of a interesting tie back.
It could be business practices too. They maybe let people sign up anonymously for discounted services or something. I know it was at Green Dot Bank for a while was getting leveraged for a lot of the ACH fraud because they were letting you sign up essentially anonymous for kind of a debit card account sort of thing. So it could just be business practices too.
Yeah, not doing the know your customer stuff and things like that. So yeah, because it's hard to get a bank account, right? You can't be anonymous about that generally. So if you're trying to find some way to do ACH, you got to have something like that. So makes a lot of sense there.
Yeah, another thing we didn't touch on, just to be clear about it in case, because we were talking about, people probably using the RTF because of the preview and stuff like that. But one of the worst parts about the part in Word as well was that you could have macros disabled and stuff. That didn't stop anything. So like anybody out there being like, well, we have that completely disabled, turned off, not able to be turned back on by a user, things like that. They're not even able to do it. It would still run in that environment too. So yeah.
Yeah, super good point, right? Because we're always harping on people, right? Disable macros, don't enable them, that kind of thing, because it's such a common tactic. But this gets around that as well. Yeah, a couple of notes I did have on it too. It does, allow code to be executed, right? One of the nice things about this is at least it does run under the context of whatever application called it. So if you're running a non-admin account on your local machine and you open it up with Foxit PDF reader, that kind of thing, it's going to run under your user context. It's not going to necessarily go straight to system or an admin or something like that. So, a little more ammunition for don't run as a local admin, right? Don't have folks being local admin on the machine, because at that point, then a whole lot of other bad stuff can happen, right? They've got access to everything. You can start kind of going nuts on those systems. So I thought that was at least a little bit of a saving grace here, but how many people do we run into that are still running local admin, right? Plenty.
Sure.
Or
it's a lot less though. At least there's
it is a lot less.
A lot less. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, but yeah, just something Eric mentioned earlier too, right? Like just keep in mind, it's not just the applications we've noted. Pretty much anything that can call the MSDT is the Microsoft Windows Support Diagnostic Tool could potentially abuse this. So keep that in mind. You can't just block out certain apps and hope for the best here. Yeah, interesting one though. But I like what Chris said earlier too. This one's kind of evolving, right? I mean, we're seeing more and more. I hadn't seen the Foxes stuff until Eric sent it to me yesterday. We were looking at that a little bit. I was still under the impression it was just Word and RTF documents, that kind of thing. So, going to keep an eye on this one because it could be a really popular technique for a while, especially if that patch isn't out. Because the mitigations that I saw were not straightforward. It was a pretty complicated, probably pushing group policies, and we all know the group policies, they work every single time you apply them. I don't know if you guys have had any experience otherwise, but so definitely keep an eye on that one, and hopefully the patch comes out soon and get that taken care of. But yeah,
is MSTT a feature on Windows that you can disable?
I believe you can't. I think some people were recommending, and I don't quote me on this one either because I don't look at it normally from the way to fix it. I'm looking at how to take advantage of it, right?
Sure.
But I do believe that was kind of the call out for a lot of people, was like, just get rid of the diagnostic tool entirely for now, right? Like just don't let it work.
Because I don't know of many people who use that for its intended purpose. So
I've used it successfully one time. I've attempted it a bunch of times. It never worked. I was so surprised. I had some network issue or something where I connected to some new router or something, and I just like, yeah, sure, run through your thing, do the thing, and it worked. And I was thoroughly surprised. But
you click the button on the diagnostic tool so that it'll disable and re-enable your adapter instead of you doing it manually. Because
basically, I'm almost certain that's what it did, right? Yeah. So I was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, the Word part of it at least does seem to be in the Insider Edition. Maybe it's already patched out. I'm not sure the exact status of that, but the MSDT part is still kind of a separate issue. So it's kind of two separate issues that all kind of combined into one. So,
and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like that's been the pattern the last year or two, right? I mean, and maybe that's been the pattern forever. It's rarely there's one CVE, one piece that's the problem. It seems like it's always a combination of two or three here lately.
Yeah, I mean, it's at least more common that it's more than one piece, or it's becoming more common than it used to be. I wouldn't say more often it's that, but I mean, it's often enough that it's something that we always look at it like that. I think that's why we keep seeing, they thought they fixed it, but now there's this, so.
Right.
So just
go ahead, Chris. I'll read this question.
I was just gonna say, just to kind of pick your brains, is how much of this, like this kind of thing, do you feel is a vulnerability that somebody just kind of stumbled across versus maybe some of the source code that was stolen by lapses is being examined and leveraged for some of these? Is that too soon?
I'm not sure. I mean, I do think that when I see things like this, like for the last two we talked about, the Confluence one and the Follina one, when I see stuff like this, I mean, essentially it's someone realizing, hey, this is how this works, and I can make it do this, right? This isn't like someone combed through a bunch of code and found a bug in the text necessarily, right? And so, when I look at things, for instance, like proxy logon, right? Like that was a comb through and kind of see like, oh wait, the way it handles the string here and it parses it, you can slip something in and you can make this happen. It's not like the intended kind of functionality almost, but these other things kind of are. And so it's just someone more realizing like the functionality supports this. Maybe it wasn't well documented, so it takes a while to find it, and realizing where it could be used. And then they find this. So someone who's really on the edge of it and paying attention has the time to do all that research. I mean, they could be quite ahead of the game, and it could have just finally been released and someone's seeing it now. Yeah.
So. Yeah, and for reference on what Chris is talking about there too, if you guys didn't hear about it, I don't even remember how long ago now. The time has escaped me over the last couple of years, but there was a whole bunch of Microsoft source code that was stolen in an attack, and I think we've all been kind of concerned about what that's going to mean, right? Because they've got the code, they can poke at it a little more than it's I assume uncompiled code, right? So it's actual code, and they can take a look at it, but. May not be the case with this one, but very likely could be the case with others. We did have a question about this from Cliff here. Said they still need to get through email filters and get somebody to click it to enable macros. So not the case with this one, right? You don't have to enable macros for this one to work, and that was the kind of one of the big scary things about this one. Does still have to get through your email filters, right? So if you're catching most spam and things like that, you may be okay. But and I know Chris can speak to this a little bit too, and I'm sure Eric, you guys may have utilized something like this as well. But a lot of what we've seen lately too is we'll compromise, or the attackers will compromise organization A, comb through contacts, see who they do business with regularly, right? And then start phishing another company from company A to company B. And so it looks like a trusted email. It's going to get through your filters. People are going to just say, hey, this is, John that I work with in accounting over at company A. Let me open his email and see what he needs today. So that happens a lot more than I think people realize. So keep that in mind as well. Your filters won't catch that kind of thing.
Yeah. But also keep in mind too, I mean, we always approach this like, oh, the phishing thing, and they got to get it through with their thing. It's going to be an outside thing. They're going to be whatever. But, Word docs, PDFs, a lot of these things that can be taken advantage of in this, even RTFs. I mean, people use for resumes. Sometimes they can just put it in a place and someone downloads it because they applied somewhere, they did something. I mean, these things can make it through without actually hitting your email, potentially. There are ways for that to happen. You know what I mean? Depending on business process, depending on who's involved and how they do it, and just general stuff like that. So I wouldn't rest on the fact that we don't allow these types of attachments in, or we have great training on this area, because it can happen in other types of course of business.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of like watering hole type of text, right? That type of thing where you've got a document hosted out there for. I'm trying to use an example that doesn't match up with the case that we worked recently, because we have actually seen that as well. But let's just say it's the house building calculator, right? Like, how much is it going to cost me to build this house? Here's an Excel doc, or here's a Word doc that works on that, right? You find that kind of thing, and could potentially have that in there. So always be careful with those types of things.
So I was just looking at our chat, and it looks like you can attach a file in our chat.
Oh yeah, exactly, right. Like, you guys could be hitting us right now with this. So
yeah. Not to give anybody ideas.
Yeah.
I click everything.
Yeah. Eric Eric wants the malware though, right? He's clicking to see if there's anything cool in there he can use later.
If you ever want to send me your O-days to the upload, I'm fine with that. Please do.
All right, dudes. Well, I think we may have beaten that one to death. Anybody got anything else on it?
No.
Okay, cool. So next one I think is a little bit near and dear to my heart. Probably Chris as well. I mean, Eric too, but just Eric's not working it as often as we are, I don't think so. So one of the things that we get asked a lot, right, is in ransom attacks, is if we pay the ransom, are they going to fully go away? Are they going to come back later? What happens here? And so we've always kind of suspected that, yeah, you're going to get your files back, right? They're going to send you the decryption key, that kind of thing, because it is a word of mouth based business, right? If we find out, there aren't a ton of ransomware groups out there, right? There are, there's a bunch of like ransomware as a service folks and things like that. But even still, these guys get a reputation from incident responders and people who do negotiations for ransom and that kind of thing. So, they kind of have to stick by their word, right? You pay me, you're going to get what you paid for. And so we've kind of always had that sort of honor among thieves thing that we know is out there, and we go with that. So you're probably going to get your files back. But I don't think we've ever told anybody that they won't come back, right? It's likely that you're now a target, right? So you think about the things that are involved with the ransom attack, right? They get in, they get their initial access, however that is. Hopefully the incident response company you're working with or your incident response team finds that initial point of ingress and closes it up so they can't come back the same way. But they also have a ton of information about your environment, right? I mean, enumeration data, here's what the environment looks like, here are the accounts, that type of thing, right? That's valuable. And so it's always kind of been the suspicion that those things get sold after an attack to other folks, or just get stashed in their files to come back later. Ransomware groups change names every 6 months now, it seems like. So they recently did some surveys and found that that was exactly what was happening, right? So folks were paying the ransom, they get that attack taken care of, and then they get hit again not too long after that. So don't think overly surprising, but I think it, at least from us, that we're dealing with it all the time. But I think that may be something that a lot of folks don't want to hear. I don't know if you guys dug into this article very much, saw anything in there that was interesting.
One of the things for me is I've been saying this for years, since the very first time I ever saw ransomware, right? When I was a sysadmin at the time, I got hit with it. You know what I mean? Like, and it was one of those things where it's just like, we can't pay the ransom because if we start now, we're always going to be paying the ransom, right? Like, I mean, obviously you want to get around, you want to have good backups and stuff like that. And luckily, the first time I ever got hit with it way back in the day, I mean, we backed up, or we were short of backups, and we found the thing and we closed it up and we handled it, and did our best at that. But I've been saying this for years, right? Is this like, if you pay it, and even if you don't pay it, if someone's able to get in and get that situation, they're going to have a lot of knowledge. They're going to be coming back. You're going to be a prime target, but it's nice to, I guess, have the data to back it up, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of what I thought too, is like, we suspected this. It's nice that somebody went out and did a survey and found out that, it's not nice that this is happening, but it's nice that, yeah, exactly, we have the data to kind of say
what
we
we're
weren't
referring to
crazy.
here, because I don't know if you said what it was, but the cyber reasons April ransomware survey. And so it was taking a look at around 1,500, I think, cybersecurity professionals were kind of surveyed on it, and taking a look at some kind of stats around that. I think, and there's a bunch of stats, and I won't cover them all. I'll leave that up for you guys. But I think the one that it was really, I guess, surprising to me, even though I kind of know that this is going to be the case, and I think that it's not overall surprising, is that one of the stats in there was that nearly 50% that were hit a second time were hit within 1 to 7 days after the first one.
That's really fast.
Now that's at 50% of the people who were hit twice, not 50% of people who were hit once, I believe. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
50% of the people who were hit a second time, it was within 7 days. That's crazy to me.
We've certainly seen that, but I think generally when we've seen it, in our incident response cases, it's been the same threat actor. They were just still in the environment. The organization starts restoring, starts bringing things back for backups, and they just hit them again because they didn't lock them out the first time. So that is pretty surprising, actually, to me. Man, that's fast.
We got a chat question asking if we post. I'll post you to the link, kind of the article we're reading off of here. I'll post that in chat. I will say though that it actually links to the actual cyber reason one, but it is gated. So just know that if you decide to go actually look at the actual report, it's gated.
So yeah, some of those statistics that you guys were alluding to, it was 68% were hit a second time. Of that 68%, 50% of those were hit within 7 days. Another 48% of those ended up paying the second time. It was just kind of stunning, but I mean, I can't say that it's that big of a surprise, because I mean, Mike, how many calls have we been on that, we'll talk to the client, they're like, oh yeah, we were hit like 2 months ago, or or you'll be into the investigation and find evidence of other ransomware attacks that.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, and I'm looking for my soapbox to stand on for a minute, but it's one of those things that we get. It's pretty disheartening to see, because I don't know, man. I always feel like we're just bashing other folks when I say things like this, and that's not the case. Please don't take it that way. But a lot of times we do come into these situations where somebody has been hit for a second time, whether that's been recently or in the last couple of years, right? And we start digging around and we find that, hey, you've had this vulnerable server sitting out on the internet for 2 years, right? It's a kind of 1,000 wonders you've not been hit 10 times at this point. And it's like, did they not find this in the first attack? And no, we cleaned up, we recovered, and moved on. And I understand that, but you have to know, like, you have to think through that process of how did they get in? Let's trace this back at least as far as we can. So, and we don't always find the definitive, ingress point. Sometimes it's tough, right? Attackers have gotten a lot better really over the last year or so of cleaning up their tracks. Things aren't as sloppy as they used to be. Things are, well scripted, things like that. So I'm not necessarily saying that it's anybody's fault, but I am saying that you need to do as much as you can. You can't just go, I'm going to go delete the ransomware. I'm going to pause there for a second, because we see that, and we see folks being trained to do that. If you're listening, but don't just go delete the malware. Don't and assume it's good, right? There's almost no way that that's going to stop the attacks, even if that was their C2, right? Let's say you clean up their C2. There's a decent chance they've got something stashed somewhere to pull down another one. They've got another persistence mechanism somewhere. You really have to be thorough in these attacks and find this kind of thing. And I mean, 68% being hit a second time, that number blew me away. It's insane. I know it happens. It's definitely not, or I didn't think it was nearly that common, honestly. I thought, 25, 30% would be kind of high, honestly, but 68% is crazy.
Yeah. Well, in that 48% number, I think, Chris, you might have said 48% were that paid the second time, just 44% that paid the second time. 48% was that they were hit a second time by the same attackers. Or whatever, however they knew that, right? And that's at least the numbers I have here, but like they were hit by they reported it was the same attackers, right? Like the same people came back another time. So yeah.
Man, yeah, really, really tough. So, I mean, it kind of mentions in the article, right, that, CISA and folks advise that you don't pay the ransom, and totally agree, right? Let's not pay them. Like Eric said, right? It's anything. You pay the ransom once, you're going to keep paying. It's just going to keep snowballing, right? Sometimes you have to, right? I mean, we all know that, but I think our general advice, right, is don't be in that position, right? Attacks happen. It's we always say it's not an if but a when. So we're not saying just don't get attacked. Yeah, sure, that'd be great. If you don't get attacked, cool. I'm fine with that, right? I've said before, I'm happy we could work ourselves out of a job and we'll go farm chickens, do whatever, right? But it's not so much that, just be prepared for when it does happen, right? So get your backups offline. That way, that's at least one piece of it that you don't have to worry about with the attackers. There's obviously extortion. It's a big piece now, right? So they exfiltrate data, steal data, and then charge you to not release it. So that's huge as well. There are a lot of things you can do there. We could probably do hours talking about how to secure that, but make sure those are on more, make sure data that you would be concerned about is on more secure systems, right? Have other layers of security so that if they pop a web server on the perimeter, they can't just go straight to that kind of thing. But the biggest one, we said it a million times, right? Get your backups offline. Do tapes. Tapes are awful. I hate tapes, but do tapes once a month, something, right? Do that, lock them up wherever you got to go to do that. At least you have some way to recover and you don't have to pay a ransom to get up and be back in business. And because, well, now we see, right? You pay that ransom, they're probably going to come back. 68%, that's big, so.
Yeah. I'd like to see the stats on how many people didn't pay and got hit a second time too. Because
yeah.
I want to be clear, we're not saying that if you don't, you won't get hit again.
No,
I mean,
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to, you have to do something, right? Recover and investigate, recover and ensure that you've closed all the doors, right? So, yeah, no, that's a really good point, Eric. I didn't think about it. They kind of say that, like, yeah, if you pay, you're totally going to get hit again. If you don't pay, you're fine. No, that's not the case at all. So, yeah, I don't know that this one. Yeah, like I said, this one kind of hurt. Just it's sad to see, but also not terribly surprising, unfortunately.
A couple
some
other
of the
things from that.
Yeah, go ahead.
That one they saw, and I'm actually, just from the perspective of trying to get the money, I'm kind of surprised by this one, but that threat actors demanded higher ransoms the second time around, or consequential times down. I would look at it from the perspective of like, well, if I know they just got hit, we just hit them, I might not try to get more than last time, right? I might want to still try to get something payable here. But that's something to keep in mind too, is that if they come back the second time, they are often asking for more. And I know, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just there thinking the process for that, right, is, well, you've already hit your insurance deductible for the year, might as well go ahead and get us some more money. Maybe how they're thinking through that, right?
There's a lot less effort on their part. They already know your environment. They know you're not in a position to restore or recover. Maybe they're thinking they didn't ask enough the first time.
Another stat on here was that 9% of the people in the survey paid 3 or more times for separate attacks, which is luckily 9% is not a huge number, but 3 or more times at escalating prices is it's like if you weren't bankrupt the first time, that's a good path to get there.
At that point, burn your environment down and rebuild it from scratch.
Yeah,
and it's
be cheaper. I mean, honestly, man, yeah. Since that's 9%, my guess is those are probably our smaller organizations, right? That maybe don't have the skills and the abilities to know why they were hit and that kind of thing, right? So I know one of the things we see a lot is we run into folks that still have a more of like a WannaCry type perspective on ransomware, where that was a little more single system hit. It was more of a virus type situation, more of a worm, right? It was self-propagating and it did its thing. I think a lot of folks don't realize now that you have active attackers. We pretty much never see, I'm going to call it viral ransomware, right? But we don't really see that anymore. It's active attackers. They're actively pushing it out. They're in your environment. So if they're in there and you recover, they're probably still in there, because how many times we run into people that have, well, we only have a week's worth of backups and they were compromised 3 weeks ago, right? Or a month or 6 months. So
I want to move us forward because we're running out of time, but I do want to,
Yep.
Rob in chat said, likely some targets that aren't even fully recovered within 7 days. Did want to ask one question kind of in relation to that. What would you say your guys' experience, not just what you guys have done, help with people, but just the research you've done, the things you've seen with other clients that, or other people that might not be our clients. What is the kind of average time you think for fully recovering from of a ransom incident?
What do you think on that, Chris? I'm gonna let you jump in and hit that one. You've worked a lot of these cases.
I mean, I don't know about fully recovered, but I mean, back up and doing business, I'd say it's probably a week or two.
Yeah. I would say that at least they're functional in a week or two.
Mhm.
Honestly, and it's usually more than a week. It's between a week and two. Fully recovered, months. Yeah, it's usually months, right? I don't think people realize how destructive these are. For perspective, right? We do give Chris all of the most difficult cases. It's so he gets to see a lot of the really terrible stuff. We abuse him pretty heavily with that. So if anybody's worked a case with Chris, you probably had a difficult one. It's not his fault. It's just that he's good. He's good at what he does. So we throw him on the hard ones. But yeah, I'd say it's in that range, sadly.
Another question in chat, which leads us right into our next topic. FYI, I can't find the article at the moment, but mentioned that phishing has been a little quieter the last couple of weeks. I can feel that here as well. The rationale is that they're busy hacking our telcos and having success attacking financial industries. Have you seen this? And our next topic was to talk about some Chinese state actors attacking, breaching telcos and stuff like that. You want to kind of roll us right into that one, Pink?
Sure, yeah. And so with that question, I would agree with that to an extent. I will say we've, in the last few weeks, have seen an uptick in business email compromise and just attacks in general. Over the last few months, it's been particularly quiet, and we always get really nervous when it's quiet. A lot of factors go into that, right? There were a lot of honestly, there were a lot of Russian threat actors that kind of got shut out of the greater internet for a bit there. I don't know. I'm sure they found ways around that by this point, but there was a lot of activity there that kind of quietened down. We didn't see as many of our Russian friends in attacks there for a bit, but I do think they're back. But yeah, exactly. And so, and like Eric said there, that's a perfect segue here. So our next topic is about, there were some Chinese state-sponsored, state actors that were breaching telcos, telephone companies, internet service providers, that kind of thing. And so the way they were doing this essentially was at least the way I read this article, it seemed a little confusing to me, the way they laid this out. So if you guys took it a different way, definitely correct me here. But it looked to me like they were basically hitting these telco companies. From there, they would then compromise the credentials that were used for small office routers, home routers, even large organization routers, right? That piece of ISP, that Comcast owned piece of equipment you have in your data center, basically getting the credentials for those. And since all of your traffic passes through that, they now have access to that and can kind of pivot and figure out what they need to do from there. Honestly, probably even steal data, that kind of thing, just as it's passing through. Kind of a tough one. I think we talked about it on the Hackle Box a few months ago, that Oscar in particular had been doing some research, digging around, and found that this was a particularly big problem, even for small regional telcos, and probably particularly for them, honestly. But lots of devices that hadn't been patched in several years and had huge RCE vulnerabilities and things like that on them. So I don't know if you guys got to dig into this one too much, but if you did, anything interesting that jumped out at you there?
I didn't dig in a ton. I mean, I did take it the same way you did, of that kind of chained flow, right? Where it's compromising one thing to gain access to another thing, then take it down into the further and to try to get access into deeper in toward either general end users or organizations, etc. The thing that stood out to me, I guess, and this is something we've harped on before, we had a very similar thing we talked about a couple months ago, maybe even last month, I can't remember. All the vulnerabilities, most of the vulnerabilities are being taken advantage of are a couple years old or older, you know what I mean? It's just a lot of these things are just we've had this much time to detect and find and discover all these things that haven't been patched, take advantage of these really critical vulnerabilities and work them out.
Yeah, it was multiple device vendors too, right? It was like all the big ones you see, and they were every vulnerability that got called out in this particular article was 2020 or older, right? So most of them were like 2020 to 2018. That's a long time to have a vulnerability sitting out there.
Yeah, and I took this a little bit of a different angle. I was trying to see, kind of what the motivation was behind focusing on telco companies. So one thing, it sounds like not a lot of people are aware of it, but China I think it's every year, they release their 5-year plan, and it's how they're going to succeed in the world. So this is their 14th year that they've released this one. So I was going back and just seeing what the motivations were and where they were focusing on. So this year, it looks like there's a lot involved in economic development. So trying to get into innovation, a lot of focus on green energy, food production, water quality, energy production, education. As far as research goes, there's a ton of research going into artificial intelligence, quantum computing, integrated circuits, brain science, genetics, biotech, medical health, deep space, earth, sea exploration, that sort of thing. And a lot of that is focused around, there were some other areas where they were focused around telecommunications, internet, education, culture, that sort of thing. So, telco is a great place to gather data. Why do billions of dollars in research when you can just steal what's been done here in the States or other places? So yeah, that's if you haven't gone through and read a translated copy of it, China's 5-year plan is going to give you a lot of insight on areas and I guess business entities that they're probably going to focus on over the next year. And they've done it historically in the past, year after year. What they target tends to be what was in their 5-year plan. So
yeah, I was totally unaware of that. I didn't know they did that at all. Chris was telling us about it before the call, so really, it's nice. You get a little bit of a playbook ahead of time, but yeah. So I do know we're running short on time. Hate to cut everybody off, but I mean, that was about all for that one anyway. And I know, Eric, you've got something about some training.
Yeah, I'll just go hit on one last thing. Offensive security, people who do Kali Linux, people who do OSCP and other types of certifications, they have announced that they are going to be taking their live Pen 200, which is penetration testing with Kali Linux, which is the course for the OSCP, to Twitch. It'll be broadcast free to anyone who wants to watch it, and I think that's really neat. There's several different reasons it looks like they're looking to do this. Some of it is because part of this kind of live training died off with the pandemic and stuff like that. They're testing out some new stuff. They're doing some new, different ways around it. But the great thing is they're also just kind of bringing it to the masses. This is going to be fantastic for anyone who, one, is looking to get into pen testing, and two, for the blue teamers who want to kind of just see that kind of angle a little bit, kind of follow along, learn a little bit, kind of get a little bit of a starting course. It definitely recommend to anyone take advantage of that stuff. I've seen some articles that had some kind of differing information, so I just went to the source, looked at their facts, stuff like that. It's going to start June 22nd. It's going to go through November 30th. That's going to be every Wednesday and Friday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. And then they're planning on interacting with anyone who's watching through Twitch chat. I guess if someone out there is listening to this happens to be a student currently doing the PWK course with them, they also have a Discord that they'll be you can watch that and you can ask, kind of more special kind of private questions, I guess, have office hours with them on the Discord if you are a student, to be clear, not to everyone. But yeah, I think it's just a great opportunity. I think it's fantastic. I look forward to not only just a little bit of learning that people who are not necessarily going for an OSCP or something like that or a pen tester can get from it, but also all the people out there who are always looking for good resources. Having this available to them is going to be great. So The Twitch channel is OffSec Official, OFFSEC Official, and they did say in their frequently asked questions page that this will be recorded. So hopefully that means that it will be on their Twitch recorded and potentially put somewhere else later on. I don't know, but maybe it'll be something that you can access as an archive. But I wouldn't rely on it just in case, because some things get removed or whatnot. So
yeah, super cool. I'm pumped they're going to do that. So looking forward to kind of watching some of that if they do make it, recordings that you can grab later. So be really neat. But cool. Well, guys, that's all we've got. Thanks, Chris, for joining us today. You're way better than Oscar. So
thanks for letting me tag along. It's been fun.
Yeah, happy to do it. Cool. Nobody has anything else. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll catch you next month.
All right. Sorry, I saw the comment in chat saying 2-second video saying try harder. That's the whole OffSec approach, is just like, oh, you didn't get it, try harder. So that's fantastic.
Beautiful. They should do that.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks for the questions in chat. Have a great one, everyone.
Yep. Bye, everybody.